Good afternoon, folks. We're just going to give a few more people just an opportunity to log in here, and then we'll get started. So thank you, and we'll be back to you shortly. Okay, folks, we're going to get started. So I'd like to start by thanking you for your time today. So my name's Jim Rovers, and I'm going to be the presenter for today's webinar. I'm the Vice President of Operations for AFI MAC Global, and one of the areas I look after is our investigation division, which from time to time, and seems with greater regularity, we're called upon to complete workplace investigations. So today, hopefully, we will cover off some things that will be of value educational-wise to yourself, and hopefully give you some tools to take away at the end of the day or some things to think about. So again, thank you, and look forward to our time together today. So the agenda for today is to talk about workplace investigations, the role of the investigator, and I think I'd like to frame it this way. The investigator does not need to be someone with an investigator title. There are those in health and safety, HR, labor relations, corporate security, and then some of those that are investigators that are tasked with conducting investigations. Want to look at the interview room or meeting room and the layout of that, and some things to consider and why that's important. Touch on some interview questions today. In a little more detail on that. We'll spend very little time on children or those with mental health issues, but we'll have a discussion around that. Also want to look at body language and what that might tell you. So often we rely on spoken words, but there are some things from a deceptive nature or body language nature that may be important clues. Written statements, some things to look for when collecting written statements from individuals, and what might be important there. Taking notes and documentation, and then we're going to spend some time on your final report and what that should look like when you're turning that over to whoever may be looking at your findings at the end of the investigation. So the purpose of an investigation is to search for the truth, okay? The second thing is hopefully, in a lot of instances, come up with a successful resolution to the complaint. And then lastly, should you be not able to come up with a successful resolution, you've got some defense against legal action in terms of what steps you took, what measures you took, why you took those steps, and away go that way. I think the most important outcome, hopefully outcome, is a successful resolution, of the complaint. We often find situations related to workplace investigations where at the end of the day a complaint is filed, interviews are conducted, information is gathered, and quite often a resolution is found, certainly mitigating the risk and making the problem go away. So I think that's the most successful outcome you can have at the end of the day, and hopefully in most of your cases you can achieve that. Okay, principles of the investigation, and I think we'll sort of high level cover that. Determine if the alleged incident occurred, okay? Identify and take into account any mitigating circumstances related to the incident. Interview all parties, report findings, and resolve the concern. So a couple things I want to touch on. When we talk about determining if the alleged incident has occurred, we have found on a number of cases where complaints have been filed that certainly are not founded in the truth at all. In some cases, they've been a smear campaign, or there's been some grudge against the other individual. So I think that's important to get to the bottom of that. And then interviewing all parties. I often get out to client locations where they have done some initial interviews and they've really decided they were going to focus their investigation on the guilty party and not necessarily talk to other folks that may have knowledge of or are on the periphery of the investigation. And that can be problematic at the end of the day. And sometimes it appears that all the facts line up and haha, we've got the the guilty person. I caution you to not have your investigation appear as if it's a witch hunt where you're focusing on a single individual and you are being objective. So please keep that in mind. Note at the bottom here, you can only take action on the basis of provable facts, not hearsay or suspicion. I think that becomes important at the end of the day and should be something that's guiding you. And you must be able to justify your actions as being reasonable. So for those of you that have conducted any type of investigation, let alone a workplace investigation, you more than likely will find yourself being questioned if it becomes something where legal gets involved. And certainly you need to be, definitely appear fair, objective, unbiased, and reasonable in what you're looking to do. Okay? If actions are taken to dismiss or discipline individuals as a result of your investigation, your actions must not appear to be harsh, unfair, unjust, reasonable. I think that's fairly straightforward. And I really just like to emphasize that at the, during any presentation, because at the end of the day, you sort of will be judged and will be questioned as to those sort of 4 bullet points. The role of the investigator is to establish the facts, not to judge, and must convey to the interviewee that you are unbiased in gathering the facts. I will say this, sometimes although you're more than capable of conducting the workplace investigation, you may be too close to it and you may have a difficult time being unbiased, and you may find yourself having to either bring in an external third party or recuse yourself and bring in another individual from within your firm to conduct that investigation, so you can remain as a neutral third party and not become part of the investigation at the end of the day. Okay. Now, why do we conduct investigations? Sometimes we have a legal obligation to conduct them. We must get to the bottom of that or the situation. It's company policy or policy breach that you need to determine what's taken place at. Some sort of evidence may be required now or in the future. Okay, we require that all parties are required to be interviewed, even if they seem insignificant in nature. We want to make sure that should proceedings take place or you're called upon later to answer questions, your investigation has been thorough and you have interviewed everybody involved. You've got a record, report of statement, and you'll need an account of the events that have taken place. So again, need to gather everything, and we'll talk in the report side of things, getting that in a chronological order that's easy to understand. And at the end of the day, you're more than likely going to be called upon to provide some sort of summary, recommendations, talk about your findings, and that becomes part of the equation at the end of the day when conducting your investigations. From a legal obligation perspective, we never know how an investigation may or may not turn out. It may not become a legal matter at the end of the day, but I think you should treat everything that you do as if it may one day wind up in a hearing, arbitration, could wind up in a court case, things of that nature. Clearly, with company policies, we create those policies for a reason, and we need to ensure that the policies are being consistently applied. We need to make sure the policy is understood and communicated, and also we want to find out if those policies have been breached or ignored. Okay, interpersonal skills, again, talk about being objective, non-judgmental, non-accusatory, need to be empathetic. We need the ability to build some type of rapport with the individuals that we're interviewing. During the interview, the investigator should only speak 5% of the time, and those are, don't get caught up in what the percentages look like. But I think here's what's important. Leave the interview the remaining 95%. What becomes very important at the end of the day is we want the people that we are interviewing to do most of the talking and us to do most of the questioning and listening and fact-finding and gathering at the end of the day, and that becomes important. We often find, particularly when we're nervous or there's periods of silence, that we like to fill those gaps by speaking, and often we need to leave more room for the interviewee to speak. And again, looking to observe nonverbal clues. Those nonverbal clues at the end of the day are not going to solve your case. However, they may provide some indicators of deception or nervousness or frustration that you may be able to pick up on and may help you with further questioning and understanding where you might be at with an individual during the interview process. Okay, we've got some pictures here that I'll run through in terms of the layout for an interview. I think very clearly what you see by this photo is we've got the person doing the interview and the subject across from one another. Sometimes there is a desk or table in between. That's not a problem. For the purposes of this picture, though, the interviewee and the subject are sitting face to face. You will note that the subject of the investigation has a clear, unimpeded path to the door and is free to get up and leave at any point in time. So we eliminate the "I felt trapped and therefore I had to answer questions." Sometimes we have the luxury of a note taker or a second person sitting in taking notes, and oftentimes we don't. We're acting alone. In those cases, you're going to have to be your own note taker. You may record the conversation. Certainly look at your policies around audio recording. Make sure you're compliant with those. I have run across clients where they do not permit audio recording by both the person conducting the investigation and or the subject of investigation. So look at that and get that squared away on the front end. If you look at option 2, this is where there's more than one party conducting the interview. That may be an HR manager and someone from corporate security, could be HR and health and safety, and again, the subject of the investigation. And again, one person can act as the note taker. There could be a desk in between those individuals, but again, you're going to note that the subject does have a clear path to the door. If you were in a unionized environment, that might look very much like this, where you have an interviewer, person on management side, and the other person sitting in the room might be the union representative representing the individual. When it comes to interviewing in a union setting, the union certainly has a right to sit in on those interviews. They should sit in on those interviews. However, please keep in mind it is your interview to conduct, and they're not there to hijack the interview. I typically, if there's someone unionized, being questioned and there is a union representative in the room, I do like to speak with him or her in advance, sort of talk to them about what the interview is about, let them understand that this is the individual's opportunity to speak, answer questions. Management at the end of the day is going to make decisions based on the information gathered. So at any point, if they're being restricted or prevented from speaking, please don't later turn and say, listen, I don't think this was fair, or whatever the case may be, and allow the individual to speak. I have said to union representatives as well, if there's something that you would like to talk to your union member about in confidence, I will definitely respect that, leave the room and then enter at such time, 10, 15 minutes down the road to restart the interview, and away you go that way. I find that rarely happens, so keep that in mind. And again, here's just a further picture to depict union steward involvement. And again, my key message here is the individual has a clear path to the door, does not feel trapped, can leave at any point in time. Okay? How you configure the room at the end of the day is going to be up to yourself. You're going to be stuck with what you have to deal with in terms of the room. I will simply say this in terms of room layout. I have been in rooms that have been extremely small. They feel claustrophobic, feel boxed in, and maybe not conducive to getting the type of positive feedback or information that you want. So please keep that in mind at the end of the day, too. We're not in a police setting where we're there to make people feel horrible or uncomfortable or boxed in. A workplace investigation is certainly different than a police-style investigation in many ways. Okay. Interview questions. So remember to interview before you interrogate. I would suggest that for most people, unless you're in corporate security and or corporate investigations, you will be simply interviewing and not interrogating. I have sat in on a lot of interviews where the interrogation, it's an interrogation and not an interview. So I need to simply just make sure that you are interviewing and you are not finding yourself interrogating, okay? And the other important thing, the interview should occur as soon as possible post-complaint or incident. The more time that passes, the more difficult it may be at the end of the day to get the information or have people have things fresh in their mind. Remember, and I'm just going to go through some differences so everybody's aware of those. And these are the differences between an interview and an interrogation. An interview is to gather information. An interrogation is to obtain a confession. An interview is non-accusatory, where an interrogation is accusatory. Interviews tend to be free-flowing, interrogation structured. Interviewees are speaking 95% of the time versus 5% in an interrogation. Interviews can be conducted at varied locations. Most interrogations are where you're in control of when, where, how in the meeting space. Interview could be in you're doing a lot of writing, documenting, taking notes. You're not during an interrogation doing a lot of writing. It's more wearing the individual down. Our internal sort of information gathered. Most interviews in a workplace investigation is 30 to 60 minutes long. We've had them go as long as 2 or 3 hours in some complex situations. An interrogation will take as long as you want. So again, at the end of the day, I just want people to understand the difference between an interview and an interrogation. And for those conducting workplace investigations, you find yourself on the side of interviewing and not the interrogation side. Your role, again, is to gather information, facts, present those facts, so whether it's your senior management or other team members can then make an informed decision as to how to proceed. Okay. Talk a little bit more about questions. So irrelevant questions, these are questions you use to put the interviewee at ease, and this allows the interviewer to observe their reaction to non-threatening questions. These questions tend to be not connected to the investigation. They tend to be casual in nature, and they don't touch on guilt or innocence. I know when I'm going in to conduct a workplace investigation, a lot of those questions at the beginning surround, you know, nice to meet you, glad that you came in today, I really appreciate you taking the time, this is important, you know, how long have you worked at the company, what type of position are you in, who do you work for, some of those softball questions that really start to put the person at ease and get the information flowing. It does give me an opportunity to gauge body language, and I also, you know, if they can't answer the easy questions at the beginning or are combative in nature, I think it sort of sets the stage for the rest of the interview. I will say this, whether a person is guilty or innocent, or is simply someone that you're a person of interest in an investigation, they tend to be very nervous when being spoken to. So you need to take that into consideration also as you interview individuals, okay? Neutral questions, so you're trying to establish authority. Again, you have the right to ask the questions, reason for your investigation, and why you're conducting the investigation. Allows the interviewer to establish and observe the interviewee's normal behavior. Oftentimes, when I'm starting those neutral questions, trying to find something both parties have in common, that might be sports, it may be a host of different things, but your goal is to try to build some sort of rapport where the individual will open up, let their guard down, build trust. And again, when I talk about building trust, I may say something like this at the beginning of the investigation. I'm here to gather the facts today. I'm not here to judge whether you're right or wrong. I hope you could be honest with me. I appreciate you taking time to be part of the process and start to head down that path where they're thinking, okay, I'm in a safe spot to provide information. Okay. And obviously, all of this is designed to minimize resistance to particularly prickly or tougher questions down the road. We'll move next to relevant questions. These are types of questions that allow for a yes or no answer and may determine direct or indirect involvement. Did you steal the computer? Did you make those comments? Did you take the money? Did you touch the person? We could go on and on and on. These are typically yes, no answer questions. They become important at the end of the day. I would say this, a lot of times I see people going in to conduct interviews where they don't have the questions or at least a starting point of questions or foundation sort of framed out. So in your planning process, look at the issue, look at the questions you want to ask, get some order to them. It doesn't mean that you have to follow those questions like a robot, but certainly at the end of the day, you need some point of reference, and you want to make sure that you're getting everything covered and you have an investigation plan when you're starting out, okay? Avoid using intimidating words. Rape, steal, may be difficult for the person to rationalize, and you'll hear avoid using intimidating or hard words. Rape might be turned into, inappropriate touching. Rob might be turned into perhaps was the item misplaced. You want to use things or hopefully frame things in a non-intimidating way. The example I will give you is I had an individual who had stolen something from an organization, and I was in to interview the individual, and in his mind he did not steal the items. He had merely placed them by the garbage bin because he had thought they had been misplaced and they were not put on the appropriate shelf. The end of that was, in his mind, he rationalized not stealing them. Rather, they were misplaced items that nobody seemed to value, and he later took them because they were by the scrap bin outside the facility, and that was the justification in his mind. Remember, again, as I said, the interviewee can feel guilty without being the guilty party. Again, if I had only stopped James from touching Sally. So there's James who's being interviewed about Sally being inappropriately touched at work, and he's giving off a lot of nervous behavior, appears to be deceptive, and it's merely the fact that he knew what was taking place and didn't stop it that led him to appear nervous and perhaps even look deceptive. Incidents involving two separate incidents, I always start with the most serious, and again, the person, if you pick on the easy one first, they'll tend to hop on that and maybe say, yeah, let's just agree to that, because that becomes the lesser of two evils. So I always like to start out with the harder issue if there's two issues there, and move to the easier issue and work my way through that. Okay, comparison questions. These are questions you would suspect an innocent person to answer truthfully. Again, you're trying to set the stage. Comparison questions are designed to create a little bit of conflict in your entire life. Have you ever lied? You know, in your entire life, have you ever sexually harassed someone? Generally, you're throwing those out there. You know, what you're going to see from a truthful person, if we take that first question, is, yeah, of course, every person's lied about some little thing. However, in this particular instance, no, I'm not lying, or whatever the case may be. And they'll begin to plead their case or provide you with the facts. If you were interviewing and you asked somebody, have you ever lied in your entire life? And the answer is clearly no, I've never lied. I think right away you've picked up on, probably I'm not going to get straight or more than likely going to get deceptive answers as I head through the rest of my questions. These are just a list of questions that we'll run through quickly, high level. Again, how long have you worked here? What do you do? Do you like working here? I often ask that when I'm there, and you know, I hate it, my supervisor's out to get me. I don't like my coworkers. What do you like most? A lot of people will again tell you, hey, this is a great place, love working here. What do you like least? They'll generally spit that out. You may get to some underlying issues for further questioning. What do you think this investigation is about? I think that's a very good, powerful opening question. The example I use in many of my presentations was some computer equipment that went missing, and I was in to interview, I think there was 14 people. Believe it or not, 13 of those people said, I suspect that you're here today to ask questions surrounding the missing computer equipment. One individual had no idea why I was there. That person was later found out to be the guilty party, and that was sort of the first warning sign that, you know, small company, 100 people, 14 people that were in on Saturday when the stuff went missing, and you're the only person that doesn't know or heard about that sent up some red flags. Tell me about what you know. Explain. Often people will be very forthright about what they know, and answer away. Again, additional questions. If you were investigating this, how would you do it? Again, what do you think caused this to happen? Did you ever think of doing this? Did you in your entire life? Have you ever done something like this? Who would you say did this? Would you give them a second chance? What would you do? Or what do you think my interviews with others will tell me about you or others involved? You can see where those questions, and I'm not going to read them all here today, folks, certainly open up a host of other avenues for you. I find when people conduct workplace or any type of investigation, they're going to have their own flair for the type of questions they want to ask. These are merely suggestions that you may sprinkle in or use at some point down the road, and I've found them to be helpful certainly when I've gone and asked. I mean, if I go back to the question, who would you say did this? You know, I've had where I've interviewed a number of people. They've literally said, I know exactly who did this. Here's who it is. Away you go. Or I may get you know, I can't really say who's done it, but I think here's who's done it. And I'm getting that same sort of feedback from 3 or 4 individuals. And that might lead me to a question that is simply like this. During interviews with other individuals that I've had here, and I'm trying to sort this out, why has your name consistently come up when asking questions? Again, that can sometimes get the person who's been alleged to have done something to feel that they need to open up. Did you tell anybody about this? Why would someone do this? And do you think anybody, or do you think this was done on purpose or by mistake? 2 questions I'm going to come back to. Would you give the person a second chance? I have found, and certainly all the literature that's printed out there, most people that are innocent will simply say, no, if the person stole something, they should be fired. You generally find the person who is involved or may know the person who is involved and has information always wants to talk about a second chance. The other thing here is, do you think this was done on purpose or by mistake? I often find that to be a really fascinating question, and you're often getting people where they rationalize, again, what they've done. No, I really did not touch Sally. This is a mistake and a misunderstanding. We were over by the photocopier, and here's what happened. I think you're still getting to the information that you want. The individual has found it more plausible to talk about why it may or may not be a mistake or how they're processing it in their mind. Back to your hard questions and soft words. Again, or sorry, hard and soft words. Steal could be borrow, kill could be hurt, threaten could be warn, harass could be tease. My message here is anytime you've got a hard word, take a moment to think about a soft word, and you can look at, certainly we're getting a lot of workplace investigations in now that are dealing with harassment, bullying issues. You know, that word harass, oh, that's bad, that's scary. No, I was teasing. Doesn't make it right, but they've rationalized in their mind what it is. Okay, some clues to look for, verbal clues, and I'll just run through them here for you. Generally, a truthful person wants to know the truth. Deceptive person wants to hide the truth. Truthful people tend to be talkative. Okay, you're not getting yep, nope, yep, nope. Deceptive can be non-talkative. I don't want you to be fooled though. Some deceptive people will just talk a mile a minute. That it could also be a warning sign. The one I like, here's the third one. Truthful people generally try to assist you and help you get to the bottom of it. The deceptive person has no knowledge, doesn't understand, doesn't know why you're speaking to them. Number 4 is also important, expresses real feelings. If you are dealing with a case of harassment, bullying, inappropriate touching, you're going to get real raw emotion. Deceptive people tend to, they put that in a box, no feelings, no details, away you go. Truthful people admit an opportunity to do something. Deceptive deny that opportunity. Truthful people will argue their innocence. Deceptive people will argue their, what I would, the term here I've got, legal innocence. So, although you may see me doing this, what you don't have is this. You'll see me on the camera taking that item. However, I did go and put that back on the shelf. Okay, well, we think you put it in your car. Truthful people tend to be consistent. Deceptive people tend to change the how and why, or things don't necessarily come out in a logical or chronicle order. Again, we talked about friendly, overly friendly, direct answers versus evasive answers, good eye contact versus poor eye contact. I don't put a lot of stock in that. There are individuals that struggle with that. They're nervous, they have anxiety. Truthful people tend to be cooperative versus uncooperative. Again, truthful people tend to be more composed versus nervous, relaxed versus nervous. These are all cues you can look for at the end of the day. I often will sort of have these on a sheet of paper as I'm talking to individuals, and it's almost like my scorecard. And I will tick off, yeah, was the person friendly? Did I get direct answers? Boom, boom, boom. It allows me at the end to sit back, and if I talk to a number of people go through that scorecard and say, wow, these individuals were pretty truthful in nature, and I've got 3 or 4 here that seem to be extremely deceptive. It also helps me not having to rely 100% on my notes. I can go to those cue cards or scorecards at the end of the day, and it's sort of a quick checklist to just aid me as a tool. Okay. Questions to detect deception. Again, what is the purpose of the interview? If you did this, would you tell me? Did you do it? Do you know who did it? Who would you suspect? Can anyone vouch for you? Do you think this was deliberate? How do you feel about being investigated? Again, not going to read every question, and the purpose of these questions are just to add some more tools into your toolbox, and whether you use these or not, they're just there as a guide to help you going forward. I do find often, and I was called into an organization a couple of years ago, they had a chap that was in procurement. There was some suspicion around him getting kickbacks from a supplier. They had called me in and said, listen, we had asked the individual some questions and it really didn't go anywhere. Could you help us with this? And I found they sort of had, and I'm really going to simplify this, folks. Did you do this? No. Were you in, or do you know who did this? No. Who do you suspect of doing this? Nobody. Anybody vouch for you? Not really. You get where I'm going. It was the way they had structured their questions, they didn't really leave themselves with an opportunity to get some good outcomes. So get those questions marched down. This company would not, so as part of their policy in HR, they would not allow individuals like myself to conduct a third-party investigation. What we did do is I did arm them with a host of questions. They sort of, tucked me away in a meeting room, came back after they had talked to the individual further, and they had gotten closer to the truth and more of the answers they were hoping to get. So again, lay those questions out, whether they're my questions, your questions, but at least have a plan is my message. And again, here are some additional questions that we've talked about throughout and may be helpful to you. Silence is golden. So again, if I sort of look back, there have been times in my career when I was younger that I absolutely hated silence or nervous tension, and I found myself trying to talk when there was silence. If the subject or of investigation or person of interest doesn't answer, sometimes silence is good, builds a little tension. Now, you clearly can't sit there for 5 or 10 minutes in silence, but I think you'd be surprised the number of times where you've sat there for a minute and then the person just opens up and the floodgates start to process or start to open, and the person starts to open up, and that becomes good. Okay, interviewing children or subjects with mental health issues. Certainly just want to, at a high level, touch this. This may not be relevant to all of you on the call. Introduce yourself. Again, develop a rapport. Talk about the purpose of your interview. Are you willing to take part in the interview? You don't have to answer questions, so that becomes important that you establish that. Do you know the difference between the truth and a lie? And understand they can correct any untrue questions. Do not try to influence their answers. I think we've seen a lot of this in these cases we see on television where the investigator has sort of led the person with mental health or the child to an outcome or an answer, and you've got that child, if I use that example, gravitating to, hey, I think this is what he wants me to say, or she. Let's just say this and let's get this over with. So you need to be cognizant of that. Body language, this is kind of a funny slide here, but I think that sends a pretty clear message. Lance Armstrong, here he is having to talk. You'll notice that hand over the mouth is a classic, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I've seen people lots of times speak through their hand and somehow, you know, hey, my mouth is covered, I'm not telling the truth. There's Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky hearing, so he's attempting to process what's happening, questions he's being asked. There is, you know, there's certainly experts, and I don't profess to be an expert in body language, but that is giving off certain signs. Okay. There's another picture that certainly tells you something. I look at that and I look at an airport, someone's frustrated, distraught, maybe missed their flight. This is clearly someone, if you were interviewing them, I'm angry, you better hurry up, and I think that this is a witch hunt or a way to go. There's certainly some anger that you can depict there. My message here is look at those body language signs. They become important at the end of the day. And may help you pick up on some things. Okay. Why people lie: to gain something they don't have, to avoid something they don't want, or to protect something they have. So I think those are sort of some of the reasons why people lie. In terms of body language, there is all kinds of information written about nonverbal cues. I will simply say this. I've seen a lot of lint picking, hand rubbing, smoothing of clothing, restless, tapping their fingers, tapping their feet. Could be signs of nervousness. However, they can be signs that, you know, the person is struggling or maybe not processing, or a sign of guilt or deceptive nature. Those can be important clues to pick up on at the end of the day. When we look at written statements, we'll talk about that for a minute. A truthful statement is rich in details. A deceptive statement tends to lack details. Truthful tends to be in first person. Deceptive deviates from first person. Truthful will introduce others, who they are. So this is Fred, Fred is so-and-so, here's the connection to this. Deceptive tends to offer no type of introduction. Okay. Use of pronouns: my daughter Sally. Lacks pronouns: the child, her. Certainly, we have had files that we've worked on here where we have had the individual in a written statement talk about a girl Sally, and let's say that they had inappropriately touched that person, and the person starts out as Sally, 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 and midway through that statement she becomes her or she. And it's sort of that individual's way of minimizing or downgrading. And again, I couldn't do something that horrible to Sally, but I could do that to her or she. So again, take a look at those truthful, or take a look at statements. Sometimes we ask people, can you provide a statement, or can you write down an incident report, or can you fill out an incident report? Look for that type of information when going through that. I often find my underlining, highlighting, circling when I find areas, and those written statements can also provide opportunity where, there's something wrong here, or it doesn't match and or make sense to me. There's an area where I need to ask more questions. The other thing I would suggest is also look for what I call excess information, where a person has just put way too much information into a statement. Again, took a course a number of years ago, and the individual asked everybody to provide a statement as to what they did when they got up in the morning to the time they arrived at the conference, and only one individual in the entire conference room had written down that he had brushed his teeth. Interestingly, the question was asked, did everybody brush their teeth this morning? 200 attendees, and yes, the other 199 had brushed their teeth. And this individual had indicated that he had an argument with his wife that morning while brushing his teeth, and that led to that piece of access information. Okay, again, truthful statement, no gaps in timeline. Deceptive, gaps, emotional, non-emotional. We're clearly deny that they did anything, only denies when pressed. The story flows or doesn't flow. Please don't take this last part to the bank, but a truthful statement generally makes up, pre-incident or introduction 20%, body 50%, post-incident 30%. I would simply say this: if you get one area of the statement that is, and I see a lot of rambling in the pre-incident, the body is very short, and post-incident is very short, or that is inverted where very short pre-incident, very short body, and then the post-incident really inflates. I generally look at that and go, uh-oh, there's something here I need to drill into. When I read a statement, I tend to look at the three areas, draw a line to separate them, and it serves as a point of reference for me. To note-taking for a moment, folks, make sure your notes are accurate. Use quotes where necessary. Avoid opinions. Avoid inflammatory or judgmental words. Support assertions of facts. Do not make conclusions. Include contradictions in your reports. If documents are obtained, you need to log those, okay? If an admission is obtained, that should say note the exact words. Record any other significant events. So really, my message here is make sure what you're doing on the notes side is extremely thorough. You will be questioned at some point down the road. If there are lawyers involved, they will have a field day with inconsistencies, opinions, judgments, information not being logged, obtained, particularly in a workplace investigation. If you're talking about a policy or a procedure or things like that, include those policies, include those procedures, any postings, documentation surrounding those needs to be captured as well. In your final report, note how was this brought to your attention, time period, a summary of the facts. Your final report should be in chronological order, the people that you interviewed, documents reviewed and or obtained, whether the findings were substantiated or unsubstantiated, conclusive or inconclusive. Conclusion, how will the company respond, or recommendations. Again, you may find yourself struggling with that a little bit, particularly if you're there simply to gather the facts. At the end of the day, you will be asked for a conclusion to most of your reports. Was the issue resolved? What company policies, again, were involved? Are there internal controls? Are they in place? Were they followed? And things of that nature become important at the end of the day. So, folks, we had a very short time together. Appreciate you calling in. I will say this, that certainly the topic of workplace investigations can encompass a whole day from a training perspective. So I hope in a very short period of time I was able to convey some information that may be useful to you going forward with your jobs or future investigations. And again, thank you for your time. Appreciate it, and thanks for joining.